Most people have dreams of taking a few months or a year out of their lives to travel the world. Traveling can be an amazing way to experience new cultures, learn a new language, and just enjoy this beautiful planet we live on. But when it comes to exploring the world, there are always risks and dangers you have to be aware of, so you only have happy memories whenever you return home. Whether that be remembering to avoid certain parts of a city or making sure to stay in regular contact with your loved ones back home. In 2014, the world was shocked when two sensible, intelligent young women went missing on a hike during their year abroad in Panama. For 2 months, it was like they disappeared off the face of the earth until their belongings and remains were found in interesting conditions. Even though their deaths were ruled an accident, the strange evidence in this case has left many people confused and convinced that something more sinister happened here. Today, we're looking at the case of the Lost Girls of Panama. Chris Kremers and Lisanne Froon were both raised in Amersfoort in the Netherlands. They met when they both worked in a cafe-style restaurant in Amsterdam and quickly became friends. Chris had just completed a degree in cultural social education, specializing in art education, and Lisanne had completed a degree in applied psychology. Chris was due to start further education in art history at a university in Amsterdam, and in the meantime was working to save money. When they started bonding at work, both girls found they had an interest in traveling, and they wanted to learn Spanish. They came up with the idea that they would travel to South America and teach children for 6 weeks. They saved up their money for months to finance the trip, and their families chipped in where they could. On March 15th, 2014, they said goodbye to their families at an airport in Amsterdam and flew to Costa Rica to start their trip of a lifetime. Little did they know, it would be the last trip they ever took. From there, they traveled to Bocas del Toro, where they spent some time getting to know the culture as well as improving their Spanish in preparation for their new job. On March 29th, they arrived in the village of Buquet, also known as Valley of the Flowers, where they'd arranged to stay with a host family while they taught at the local school. However, when they arrived at the school, they found that there had been a change of plans. For unknown reasons, the girls were told that the school was no longer able to accommodate them and they would have to wait another week before they could start work. Understandably, both Chris and Lisanne were really disappointed by this news, but they tried to make the best of their situation. Panama is a great country to be stuck in. It has lots of natural beauty, and the locals are said to be friendly and welcoming. Buquet is in the western highlands of Panama and surrounded by rainforests and coffee plantations, which contribute a lot of wealth to Panama's economy. It's also the home to Volcan Peru National Park, the highest point in Panama. The girls actually climbed Volcan Peru during their trip, which is a popular activity for tourists. April 1st was the last day the girls were ever seen alive, and the details of this day are confusing to say the least. I'll try and keep this as simple as possible because I got super confused when I was researching this. That morning, the girls wrote on their Facebook pages that they were going to spend the day touring the village and had plans to go to brunch with 2 Dutchmen they had met in the Bocas del Toro. According to the sources, they took their host family's dog with them when they left sometime that morning. Later that evening, the dog returned home alone. This is a piece of information that always confused me for one reason: the photos taken on the day the girls went missing. Among their possessions was a Canon PowerShot SX270, and the girls used it throughout their trip, including the day they went missing. Firstly, a dog does not appear in any of the photographs that they took that day, and they took a lot of photos that are freely available to check out online. You can't even see them holding a leash in any of the photos. Plus, when their belongings were found, there were no items that you'd expect someone to have if they were taking a dog on a hike. No dog treats, no extra water, no poop bags. I don't know why anyone would lie about something like this, or if it's just coincidence, but this really weirded me out. The second confusing detail is the timeline of their day, because the hiking trail they wanted to take, the La Piñaista Trail, was a little out of the way. The girls took a cab to the start of the trail. The cab driver was interviewed after they were announced missing, and he claims he drove them sometime in the mid-afternoon. However, according to the photos they took that day, they were already there by 11 a.m. The host family was concerned when their dog returned home that evening without Chris and Lisanne, but tried not to panic. They decided to wait until the morning to alert the authorities just in case they'd gone out for the night, as many young women do when they're on vacation. The next day, the girls failed to show show up for a meeting with a local tour guide, and their host family realized the girls never came home. They reported them missing to the authorities, who began searching for Chris and Lisanne on April 3rd, after contacting their families with the unfortunate news. The authorities conducted an aerial search of the forest surrounding the village, as well as a search on foot of the trail and the village itself. By April 6th, the girls were still missing and starting to fear for the worst. Their families flew out to Panama to assist with the investigation, along with detectives from the Netherlands. The search into the forest continued for a further 10 weeks, but they simply couldn't find any sign of Chris or Lisanne. Finally, in June, a woman from the local Nagabe tribe approached the authorities and gave them a backpack she found by a riverbank. When they looked inside, they realized the backpack belonged to Chris and Lisanne. In the backpack contained 2 pairs of sunglasses, 2 bras, their cell phones, about $80 in cash, a water bottle, Lisanne's passport, and the camera. Everything was neatly packed into the bag and totally undamaged by the 70 days it spent in the rainforest. This in itself is strange. The fact that the bag was found near a river suggested to the authorities it'd fallen in and washed up on the shore where the woman found it. Plus, a rainforest is called a rainforest for a reason, and it had rained pretty heavily since the girls went missing. Despite that, the bag and all of its contents were completely dry, and none of the electronics were damaged. Their phones and camera became key pieces of evidence in the investigation of what happened to Chris and Lisanne. On the camera, they discovered hundreds of photos taken during their trip and on the day they went missing. The photos taken that day show Chris and Lisanne looking happy and healthy, wearing light clothing appropriate for a shorter hike. The La Pianista Trail is usually a 5 to 6 hour round trip. They started off at 11 a.m., then they definitely should have been almost back at the start by around 5 p.m. However, in the photos, it looks like the girls went off trail when they reached the summit. This area of the forest is known to be especially dangerous between April and October, which is the rainy season. Even the Nagabe tribe tend to avoid this area for their own safety. The photos taken after 1 p.m., which is around the time they reached the summit, show the girls exploring deeper within the jungle, exploring near a river, and in areas packed with green nature. The last photo we know they took was just before 2 p.m. and shows Chris standing on a rock next to a fast-flowing stream. The reason I say it was the last photo we know they took is because that wasn't actually the last photo on the camera. In fact, at least 90 more pictures were taken after that photo of Chris. All of these photos were taken on the night of April 8th, a week after the girls went missing. All of the photos are taken in the middle of the night, and it's impossible to tell what the photographer was trying to accomplish. With the flash on, the photographer captured pictures of their surroundings, and we can see trees, rocks, and possibly cliffs in the photos. The strangest photo in the set is a photo of Chris's hair. Even though at this point they'd been in the jungle for 7 days, her hair looks clean and dry. My hair doesn't even look like that at home, let alone out in the wilderness with no shelter or protection. We can't see her face in the photo or the rest of her body, so it's impossible to say if she's even alive in the photo. Why take these photos at night instead of during the day? Well, one theory is that they were trying to use the flashlight as a torch or as a way to attract help if they heard someone nearby. What we can gather from evidence on their phones is that the girls did run into some kind of trouble. When they examined Chris's iPhone, they saw that she tried to reach Dutch emergency services at 4:39 p.m., but the call couldn't connect. The same happened when she tried to call 911. At this point, both phones were turned off, presumably to save battery, and they tried to call for help again the next day. They tried to call emergency services several times, but only managed to get through once, when Lisanne's Samsung was able to connect through the Dutch emergency services for a couple of seconds before the signal failed. Lisanne's phone ran out of battery on April 6th. Between the 7th and 10th of April, someone tried to unlock the iPhone 77 times, but failed to enter the correct passcode. This is what started the theory that something bad happened to Chris and Lisanne. What are the odds that Chris would put in the wrong code into her phone 77 times in a row? It could have been Lisanne trying to unlock it, but if you're familiar with iPhones, you'll know that you don't need to unlock the phone to call emergency services. Another cause for concern was the state that the backpack was found in. If the girls were hurt or in danger, would they have had time to pack the bag so neatly with the camera and their phones inside. Plus, through the photos, it was discovered the bras in the backpack were actually the ones they were wearing on April 1st. Why would they take them off? Could somebody have removed them and put them inside the bag? One of the most concerning pieces of evidence is the 34 different fingerprints on the bag. Who do they belong to? What were they doing with the bag? Although the case was strange, with very little to go on, the police were forced to rule the case as an accident. They said the most likely explanation was that the girls got lost after they left the trail, were injured or attacked by an animal, and unfortunately, died. They continued to search for their remains with the help of the local tribe. Before long, they found Chris's clothes, which were neatly folded along the edge of the river, a 14-hour walk from where the backpack was found. 2 months later, they finally discovered their remains, which were reduced to bone and scattered all over an area of the forest. They were able to identify Lisanne through DNA when they found her shoe, which still contained her foot. Chris was identified when they discovered part of her pelvic bone and one of her ribs. It looked as though Lisanne had decomposed naturally, but Chris's bones were very clean and white, like they'd been bleached in the sun. This suggested that Chris had died much sooner than Lisanne did. To this day, we aren't sure what happened to these poor girls who had no idea how awful a normal day was going to turn out for them. Many think they were murdered, and I've got to admit, some of the evidence here is definitely fishy. 34 fingerprints, neatly folded clothes, scattered bones? Even if they did just die by accident, someone else was definitely there. That brings us to the end of today's video. What do you think of this case? What do you really think happened to Chris and Lisanne? I can't wait to see what you guys think down in the comments below.